welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. If you've not yet heard of Kristin Hersh, well, I envy you because she has a rather storied career ready for you to dive into. Having first formed Throwing Muses alongside her stepsister Tanya Donelly in the early 80s, the group swiftly became an impressive musical force, with records arriving via the influential 4AD label. In 1991, Donnelly left the group to form Belly, having co-founded The Breeders just a few earlier, and Throwing Muses continued as a trio. By 1994, Hersh had kicked off a solo career, and in 1997, Throwing Muses disbanded, and she went on to focus on her prolific solo work. By the early 2000s, she'd become a little bit busy, to say the least. More solo albums followed, Throwing Muses reformed, and she'd even begun a new band called 50 Foot Wave. For Kristin, downtime is not something that she does, because it wasn't long before she became an author as well. I feel like I need a bit of a diagram just to help sum up how impressively prolific Kristin really is. But let's fast forward a few years, because in 2025, Throwing Muses are back with a new album, with Moonlight Concessions arriving as their first new record in 5 years. It'll actually release on March 14th, when Kristin is in Australia as part of yet another tour of the country. Somehow, her busy schedule allowed her to join this humble little podcast for a chat ahead of what will soon become another full year of music, touring, and songwriting. Anyway, I strongly urge you to check out Kristin Hersh's extensive back catalogue and the new Throwing Muses album when it arrives next month. And once you're done giving that a spin, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Kristin Hersh, thank you very much for joining this episode of Trusty Chords.
Thank you for having me.
So, for those who might not recognize your name, could you give me a quick few words on who you are and I guess why we're chatting today?
My first band is called Throwing Muses. We've been going for, 150 years now. We started when we were 12, and we have a record coming out in a few weeks. And my solo career, I started midway as a way to escape a corporate recording industry. I traded my first solo record for our contractual freedom. And then I started a band called 50 Foot Wave, which is essentially noise rock, math rock, and completely DIY, almost as an experiment. Musically, I adore it, but the experiment was to extricate myself completely from the traditional recording industry and see what could be done without the middleman.
I'm so glad we've got someone like yourself to actually explain this, because you're doing a far better job than I ever could. But I guess these are all things we're definitely going to touch on. But I guess what I'd love to do at the start of these podcasts is actually go back in time to where a love of music first formed. So for you, Kristin, do you have a recollection of your earliest memory of when music first resonated with you?
I lived on a commune when I was little, and my parents took me to Woodstock, and they used to take me to concerts. So I probably don't remember, if that's a good answer.
I mean, it's a fairly impressive thing almost not to remember, really, isn't it?
All right, that's good. That's a nice way of putting it. And my parents are from Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So they also played me Appalachian folk music. And I guess that combination is what Throwing Muses sounds like at its essence, which is, I'm not proud of that, but I can trace my musical roots to pre-verbal memories of sound, I think. Even though it felt like I was inventing a sonic vocabulary, and most people who have heard our records agreed we were from outer space. I now disagree. I think it was rooted in something that was very fundamentally American.
It must then actually be quite interesting to know that this music is quite innate to you as well. It's just sort of something that just comes from within, rather. I mean, obviously it comes from all these external forces, but for you, it's very innate, isn't it?
Yes, it's a funny combination of truly within and truly without. It's essential to me, and yet when it's good, I don't feel particularly responsible for it. As you know, if you are looking for inspired moments to turn into inspired work, you're going to wait for it to breathe. And if it's just recycled air you're pumping into it, and you made some more zombie art. So I'm very aware of having gotten in the way too many times. And um, so I like to keep it pre-verbal, I suppose. I like to listen to what the music wants to do next and then be shocked by that.
So I guess I should sort of say as well, because you're obviously mentioning how you were surrounded by this music, even though some of you don't remember. But were there any particular artists that you do remember listening to in those earliest days? And I mean, this is obviously without mentioning the Appalachian folk music, of course.
Yeah, my dad's name is Dude. Dude had a nice record collection. It was definitely a dad's record collection, but it was nice. Like Neil Young and the Doors and the Clash, Talking Heads, Philip Glass, and he was the first person to teach me a chord on the guitar, which I wasn't allowed to touch. He had a really nice Yamaha that he kept behind the couch, and when I came home from school, I would just stare at it, just lean over the couch and look at it. And I think that bugged him. I did it long enough. He said, "All right, I'll teach you a chord." And he actually taught me three chords, but I was really unimpressed. And I think I looked sad. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, you just taught me red, blue, and yellow, primary colors. I want to play turquoise. I want to play burgundy. I want to play ochre." And he just handed me the guitar and said, "It's yours. Play colors."
It seems like a very supportive way of learning, like getting into music as well there, because I feel like a lot of people aren't sort of given a guitar and told explore it. They're sort of given a really rigid sort of methodology of learning.
Yes, I travel all over the world carrying a guitar, and it makes Uber drivers and taxi drivers like admit it's like, "Oh, I love the guitar. I have one, but I never took lessons. Someday I'll take it seriously." And I say, "No, no, no, don't. Never take it seriously. Don't take lessons. Play what you find to be beautiful." And they'll say, "Oh, I can't even tune it." I was like, "Perfect. Tune it to the notes you want to hear, and then invent chords." And when you find your sonic vocabulary, it's because you're lost, not because you are imitating something.
That's amazing, really. Because I have a very vivid memory when I first started learning guitar many years ago now, and I distinctly remember my mother saying, "Don't pick up the guitar unless your teacher has taught you things. You don't want to start developing bad habits." And part of me wishes I could go back to that sort of pre, teacher sort of time and actually say, "No, I want to just discover. I want to tinker. I want to do all this sort of thing and see
Yes, yeah.
where I would take myself."
And part of that, obviously, is a lack of self consciousness, which is the only thing that is asked of you in the entertainment industry. Self consciousness, and be obsessed with your image and how it comes across. It's a deadening process, which is why I fought so hard to remove myself from the industry. But before that, when I was a kid, I took classical guitar lessons for years and I loved it. It was a way to become facile with theory and to let my hands learn to fly, but also to follow rules. And I realized this is just a beloved hobby. It's no longer a passion, it's no longer scary. And I want it to be scary again. So it took years for me to unlearn that rigidity, as you say.
And I guess that's also a nice little segue because it was in the early 80s that you and Tanya formed, I should say, Throwing Muses. So at the time, you're both young. I'm assuming you hadn't quite had a real crash course in music at the time, so everything is probably a lot more instinctual than, learned and considered. So when that band first formed, was there a specific plan in mind, or was it just to make noise, or did you foresee and secretly hope for a big future?
I started writing songs when I was 9. And my drummer, Dave Narciso, uh, heard me in a practice room in our school. And I looked up and his face is in the window. And then he opened the door and said, "We have to start a band." And so I had this, I was still probably taking classical guitar, but I hadn't quite lost um, the songs. I want to say self assertion. I was still able to listen pretty clearly to what music wanted to say. But when our bass player, Leslie Langston, joined, she had a similar melodic sensibility, very complex. We both wanted to be fascinated by every measure. And so we would come to band practice, which was in Dave's attic. And we would spread out just like sheets of music all over the attic just to try to fascinate each other and ourselves in every measure. What we didn't realize when we started playing out was that that is cacophony. A rock club audience. I didn't care, but we were children essentially, and we were playing in these rock clubs every night, opening for everybody, and we were just considered to be from outer space, like I said, which I was a little sad because we thought we were a party band.
Right.
We played parties, and when you leave your world and you realize you're strange, it can be sort of sobering. So I wasn't encouraged to develop my ear in that regard. You were supposed to imitate, and you were supposed to be ambitious and all that. And I just had no interest. Well, once you land on the planet music and it really shakes your spine, how on earth are you expected to move to downtown stupid and join everybody else in the suck? Like, I knew I wasn't gonna make money. I wasn't interested in any kind of attention. So I don't think without my drummer and bass player, I would have even booked shows. I was so lost on that planet.
That is such an amazing analogy, actually. Like I would love that to be like the little headline of this. If I was turning this into an article, that would be my headline, I feel.
Oh,
Um, and like so obviously your career, it's so hard to actually sort of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for, condense into something very bite-sized in the time that we have. So I sort of need to sort of jump forward a little bit. But so it was in the, I think in 93, there was the recording of both the University album and then your Hips and Makers record. So I think originally, but my question was going to be, so, what made you decide to go solos? But it was fascinating to hear you say before that you basically traded, you were saying that you traded like the album for your solo career. Sorry, I may have gotten it wrong, but what was the general process there that led to your solo career?
I just, as soon as I realized that um, Warner Brothers wanted product out of me, the insult of fashion product and the sexism that was asked of women then, um, I said, I'm out of here. This is awful. I'm not going to insult the listener that way, and you're insulting me by asking me to do this. And I would say 99.9% of anyone you've ever heard has played this game, and I had no interest in being heard if that's how we had to do it. So I've kind of fought them and fought them, and they're not bad people. These are employees that you're dealing with, but the machine is anti-music, and everyone who works there knows it. They'll say, "We don't want music because people who love it can't be told what to buy.
Mm.
People who love anything can't be told what to buy. People who like marketing can be told what to buy and then told to buy something else when the next trend comes along, and that's how their business works. And I said, yeah, I'm not a business. And they said, yeah, we know, but it doesn't, they don't let you go. That's not how it works.
Of course.
So they actively destroyed our career. At the university, they refused to send to any of the record stores that ordered the record. If a radio station played it, they would call them and threaten them to remove the payola if they didn't take it off the air. They just destroyed us. And I didn't care, it's just obviously I don't want to be a pop star. It's stupid. You have to play lame music, and it's not even music. There's no such thing as bad music. It's either music or it's not. And I wanted to play music. And so we did our tours. We had, this is our top selling record, University, the one that they destroyed. So it was just this, it was so ludicrous. And I finally said, well, what would it take? Like, do you want a solo album out of me? Thinking, of course not. Like this band of that no one cares about. If you take one person out of this trio, and they're going to care a third as much as they do, right? But no, Warner Brothers was like, yeah, that's what we want, and we'll let you go if you give us a solo record.
Wow.
Which is, it's also fine. I did not belong in the business. The business is not for songwriters and it's not for musicians. It's for kind of like performers playing dress up, and they would, if they could be actors, they'd be actors. And even the musicians that are there know that they really should not be playing music if they want to be pop stars or rock stars. And so they don't. They play, it's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a journalist for many years, and pretty much throughout COVID, I ended up as the editor of Rolling Stone Australia for a few years, and just having to deal with the business side of things, it really takes. I mean, just as a journalist, it takes the fun away. Being in the music industry, you think, oh, that's going to be a bit more fun. Then you realize it's too much business, and people are just there to make money, and you're just like, this isn't really what I signed up for, is it? And I'm feeling you must have really felt the same way.
Yeah,
You just wanted to
I'm
be
sorry that
creative.
that happened to you.
Oh,
That's really,
it's fine.
but it's disenchanting.
It
And
is, yes.
when, like I say, if you love music, you're a lover, you're not a liker. And it's very different. When I was a kid, I knew the reaction that I had in audiences, and it was vivid and genuine. And they did not um, e- expect me to perform, to show off. They expected me to be a conduit, uh, and to let the song fly to them, and it was theirs. I was very aware that when there was a true listener there, it was not my song. So there's no shame, there's no pride, there's no self consciousness, there's only disappearing. And then love, they just took it in, no matter how messy and unpretty it was. It was gorgeous in coming out of their eyes. And that was just gone. When Warner Brothers got the audiences that we got were like frat guys and chicks. I don't know how to describe it. It's just awful. I've never been so lonely as I have been on these big stages where no one got it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's true. I have lots of friends that stand on these big stages, and if you think that makes you special, you're not looking at the timeline. There's someone just like you thinking they're special and doing the tap dance last night and the night before and tomorrow night and the next night. There's this stream of people that they know they're faking it, but the audience members aren't there to love. They're just there. And it's disenchanting. It's
Yeah.
sad.
It truly can be, but I guess that's why we persist, though. It's why we keep making the art and trying to
Thank you
actually
for knowing
keep
that. Yeah,
creating. Yeah.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
of course. I mean, I have so much respect for people who create for the love of it rather than the business of it. They are some of my favorite musicians, and I feel so much more connected to them as well. And I mean, I could keep on, or I could keep on that topic for hours on end, but I suppose I should actually use that as a very labored segue to actually say to you, so around that time when you actually had your solo career begin and everything, it obviously started under these like strange circumstances, really, like these unexpected circumstances. So had you expected the solo work to be well received? Like you obviously had a little bit of name recognition through your work with Throwing Muses, but had you actually considered a solo career to be something you're still working with like 30 years down the line?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't think that way anyway.
Yeah,
Honestly, our orientation is not releases, it's music itself. So
of course.
we play as if it's like jumping in a river. You just play and play and play. And it's those moments that you're looking for. But what to do after that is so far downstream, to carry that analogy, that I can't even remember like what songs are on what records and when they came out, because for me it's the music itself. I engaged with it every day, and sometimes we will freeze those if they seem like they want that. If the song is a shareable entity, meaning it could be part of someone else's soundtrack, then that's appropriate. Not because it's good or because it's lame, but because it just is shareable and it's a social song. And some of those are put on records, and some of those records are released. So to actually ask me to look up and imagine if anyone was going to pay attention, I just would have squinted at you. I'm just not made that way.
Yeah.
And so I do remember thinking, oh, they're just being nice to me. They feel sorry for me. And so they're going to let me go. And this is their excuse. And they're never going to release this because it is a kind of clunky little bunch of acoustic songs. I was just trying to escape. And they did. They released it. And Michael Stipe sang on one of the songs. I said to, because he was calling saying, "You're going to ruin this. And, like, don't ruin it." I was like,
Wow.
I know. I'm keeping it the same. And while he was talking, I was having trouble recording the cello part because I thought it would be sort of a nice, smooth bass, and it wasn't at all. It was really textured and boomy and rattly. And I was just trying to get the cellist to play a low D. And Michael's like talking to my ear. And I said, you know what? I'm just having so much trouble with this cello. I got the mic everywhere and I can't make it stop sounding like a horse. And he said, "Oh, low D." It's like, wow, yeah. And while he's talking about mic placement, I said, "Oh no, that's not it. Michael, you have to sing on this song. I'll fix it. It's your voice. It sounds really good." And I said, "And don't worry, they're never going to release this record. And if they do, there won't be a single. And if there was, it certainly wouldn't be this song. There are no drums on it. There's silences. And even if it was a single, there's never going to be a video." So of course, poor dude, they like released it. It's this big single, and we had to make a video, and he was freezing the whole time. But that, because of Michael's name, Warner Brothers promoted it, and that's the only reason anyone heard it. So it actually doesn't suck, which is unusual for something that gets corporate promotion.
That's fair. Actually, that's actually quite fascinating to hear that the story behind it. Because I mean, that was the song that I first, and I guess I should say for the listeners who may not know what I'm talking about, the song is "Your Ghost," and I guess that was actually the first song, like a lot of people, of yours that I had first heard. But I mean, I'm such a huge fan of REM, but I had no clue that was Michael's voice when I first heard the song. So I was listening to it and I just thought, wow, this song is really arresting. It's a gorgeous song. It wasn't until probably maybe 5 years later that I realized Michael Stipe sang on it as well.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I was just playing in New York and with Grantley Phillips,
I love
and
the musician.
Michael was in the audience, and I didn't know. I guess he thought I would have heard that he was there, and I was supposed to call him up when I did Your Ghost, but I didn't. Nobody told me he was there, and so he started doing his backing vocals in the crowd,
Oh wow.
freaking out all the people around. And I didn't hear it. He
And
had to tell me afterwards. I mean, he was like, "Yeah, I was trying to stage this really beautiful moment. You didn't even notice."
I could only imagine that for a few moments, or like anyone else who was in the crowd around him was just thinking, "Who the hell is this guy?" Oh wait,
That's what he said. Yeah, nobody knew.
it's amazing. I should sort of like skip forward a little bit. I'd love to sort of spend ages on like the likes of 50 Foot Wave, but I think one question I do want to really ask you is that you do have these different projects. There's Throwing Muses, there's 50 Foot Wave, there's your solo work, and I guess for you, is there a specific way that you sort of, I guess, write music at all? Do you write to a specific sound, or do you just write a song and think, actually, this is a Throwing Muses song, or this is a 50 Foot Wave song, and it sort of fits into this category?
It's a stupid answer. Do you want it anyway?
I love stupid answers because
Oh,
it's a stupid
God, I
podcast,
got
so feel
so
free.
many stupid answers. uh, the energetic that is a song before you give it a sound body. I don't know what that is, but the relationship between the musician and that energetic would be called inspiration. And everything you do after that moment is to recreate it. So I figure the closest I come to truly grasping what the song is and why it's using me and my stories to create its body is that moment. So I figured when I reach for the guitar, that's when I know it best. That's when the producer, the songwriter, the musician all join up, and I won't fail the song. There's so many dendritic choices to make after that. The complexity of what happens after that means there's no perfect song and you just screw up right and left. But when I first reach for my Telly or my Strat, I know it's a music song. If I reach for my Les Paul or SG, I know it's a 50 Foot Wave song. And when I reach for my Collings, I know it's solo. But my drummers tell me it's a stupid system because they argue over songs.
I mean, if it's a
And they
system that
both
works for you, then why not let it work for you?
well, it works for me. They say it doesn't work for them.
Ah, well, that's a
I say, well,
that's a
I'm doing
problem
it
for
a long
them.
time and I'm the boss.
Exactly. Now, in next, let's say next month it is, in only a few weeks, Throwing Muses have a new album out, first album in 5 years. And I listened to this album this morning. I had a preview stream of it, and it's a really wonderful record. It's beautiful to hear Throwing Muses releasing music again. And
Thank you.
it is truly a gorgeous record, and I'm so like I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. I mean, I've obviously got no
Oh,
skin in the
thank
game, but you're doing such
you.
great work, Kristen. And I suppose I should sort of say, it has been 5 years between records, but what does an album like Moonlight Concession say about who Throwing Muses are as a group in 2025?
Every time I step foot in the studio, the first day of recording, I know exactly what amps I want to use, where I want the drum mic placed, what reverbs I don't want on the backing vocal. I know everything. I have so many notes taken that are impressionistic, stylistic concerns that I'm so excited about. And every single time I'm completely wrong. Like, have you ever even heard a record before wrong? Which I am thrilled by. I'm finally sort of letting go of the production notes.
Hmm.
But it's hard because I get so excited and I think they're really good ideas, but the songs don't. And so I stand in front of the speakers and I respond and respond and respond and I play a million overdubs and then I erase almost all of them and I start breaking instruments to combine them into Frankenstein instruments and layering sounds and then embedding um, noise and overdubs that you don't really hear. And every single time I do it, I'm shocked. Not because it's so challenging, because I do bury a lot of the challenging things. The time signatures are um, they keep us interested. The chords, anything atonal, keeps it kind of bumpy and erratic, and yet I don't think I really need to hurt anyone's feelings. So I'm not sure anyone can hear the complexity, but it keeps the ear engaged so that you can listen a few times. And um, the this record, I was just really struck by its sweetness. I don't know that on Purgatory Paradise, which is record before the last one, Sun Racket, it's like our masterpiece. It's got 35 songs on it or something, and they're like, blah! It's like 5 years of obsessive work on this record. And I made it all before Dave and Bernie played on it. So Dave had to come into the studio and hear the whole record and sort of respond as a drummer. And all he did after listening to it was look at me and say, I'm shattered too. So I didn't know what the upshot would be this time. You know, it was not shattered. I think it's honestly just really sweet. And it harkens back to music we played when we were about 14 for some reason. And it just happens to have been written about a block away from where I wrote our first album. So there's a lot of going back in time and then jumping ahead of time, going back in time and then jumping ahead. And it ends up in this it's a sweet, sweet spot, which is not a place where I live too often. If we were dancing around, I figured it was working. And if you stop and squint at the speakers and there's something wrong, you know, and that was it. That's really not like me. I'm usually much more experimental in this.
Well, it is a truly wonderful record, and it's nice to hear this sort of almost like full circle aspect to it as well. To sort of just see how it's like, all these years later, it is quite sort of, has these early hallmarks of the first record. I feel like I'm rambling now, but you get what I'm trying to say.
That's very kind of you. I'm glad you like it because I was just a little bit thunderstruck. Like, why is it so nice? Why is it so sweet? I was like, better not to ask these questions, I suppose.
Now, I do also want to touch on your Australian tour in just a moment. But just before that, we're also speaking ahead of the release of a new book from yourself. You're just everywhere. You do everything. And so this book is The Future of Songwriting. So you've written some wonderful work previously, including a sensational volume about the dearly missed Vic Chesnutt. Now, I don't want to spoil things for future readers, but what does the future of songwriting hold for us all? Should we be worried about AI, or is that a question I'm really, I'm biting off more than I can chew with the time we have?
I think we've been listening to AI songs for a good long time now.
Not wrong.
This is not humanity writing music that we've been listening to. Maybe because I'm American and our most impactful export is the entertainment industry, and it doesn't run this place, but it colors it, and it could color it with an unpretentious kind of old Hollywood or 70s sitcom feel, and that's okay. But when it starts to sort of bleed out like it has been for the last few decades in just a sea of insubstantial product, you realize music is always going to be, but it would be very unusual to hear it in the music business. So my impression of the future of songwriting is that it's the past of songwriting, that there's no reason we ever needed to use the stage, which is actually to facilitate the listening process, as a place to shine spotlights on performers who then had nothing to offer. It's just people who have, ego problems and consider themselves leading men and ladies. It's better, it's kinder to look away from that. The rock star should never have been. And we're coming back to a time where the chorus could matter again. Chorus meant we sing this together. And in this country, at least, folk songs were an impressionistic blend of hundreds of voices, and no one knew who any of them were. Before the Carter family went around, starting the publishing industry, no one owned songs. And I think that's probably a better place to be. Songs are happening all over the world, but very few of them are going to be in the ego-driven entertainment industry because, love and money really don't go together. These pimps are not creating art and they're not inspiring art. So it's going to have to happen outside of the business, like it always did, really. The televangelism is not going to redefine spirituality. It just becomes very obvious that it doesn't have any.
Yes, I understand. I mean, I actually spend quite a lot of time in America because my wife is American. But however, I tend to spend my time away from the ego-driven areas, and instead I end up in places like Tulsa, where she is from. And so I spend a lot of time in the South, and like spending a lot of time just like trying to chase those threads of like real music. You know what I mean? Sort of like a lot of the folk era with names like, Woody Guthrie, for example, and just trying to sort of like get really into that mindset of the pre-publishing era and everything like that. And it's something I feel like a lot of people should really get into, sort of avoid the money making industry and sort of go back. I don't want to keep using the phrase real music or anything, but back when music
But you're
was a
right,
business.
right.
Yeah.
They don't want real, and real people make real music, and they don't want real people. And it's really about the character actors, right?
Mm.
And if you've heard something, it's because it's participating in an industry, and it's a little bit sad, but we can hear those moments in these character actors. And because the industry is collapsing, and because units don't sell, and it's not backed by money any longer, because there isn't money to be made any longer, it's just starting to, well, shatter. And that's great that Goliath fell, and it's still there, we're upholding the scaffolding. This is like, okay, everybody say there are still rock stars.
Of
But
course, yeah.
it's not true, and that's great. There should never have been any. I'm in New Orleans, so it's the same.
Mm.
There's just music everywhere, and um, it's vividly clear that when it works, it's not for money. There's fair exchange, absolutely fair exchange, but the sadness of a whole populace being musically illiterate because they've never heard an Apple, they've only heard McDonald's.
Yes.
It's going to take a while for the dust to settle. But they're getting a great education through streaming, where they can listen through era and genre and really find their own fingerprint of a soundtrack. And that's maybe not in my lifetime, but we will see the trickle down effect of that kind of love.
Actually, I should also say, speaking of New Orleans, New Orleans, I've only been in New Orleans once, but I experienced the hottest gig I've ever been to. I went to the venue One Eyed Jacks well before it closed, and I have never been into a hotter venue, and I still have I almost have PTSD of when I think about shows there.
Oh,
But
I'm
but
sorry.
otherwise, my experience was wonderful. And again, as a nice little segue, speaking of real musicians making real music, you are about to be here for an Australian tour, and you've been coming here for decades now, and it's always a pleasure to see your name on posters that show up around the place. But
Oh, thank you.
it's fine. I could heap praise upon you for hours, but I guess what is it about Australia that keeps you coming back?
The first time we went, it was we left a blizzard in New England, flew to LA, and the plane got grounded for some reason. So we had 24 hours in LA, which was supposed to be the amount of time we were given in Australia to acclimate to the, switching up day and night thing. So we flew in with an hour to, before we had to walk on stage. And we had been told that Australian audiences were cold. Don't bother going because you guys like a nice, sweaty, uh, enthusiastic audience. And so, but we were cold. It was blizzarding. So I was like, I don't care as long as it's warm.
We'll take
But
anything at this point.
yeah. So we watched this weird ass movie that I swear to God is the weirdest movie any of us have ever seen. And we've been up for like 48 hours. We were completely freaked out by this movie, and walked right on stage, still doing lines from this messed up movie. And um, just assuming, well, these people aren't going to like us. Nobody likes us anyway. We're just losers, and they don't like anything. And y'all stood there for like 3 songs, just listening really carefully, and then erupted. Like, you went crazy. And I know it's not you, but I'm going to give you points for this because we love you. everybody went crazy, and then we started having fun, and we're nutsy, on this whacked out movie and being awake for so long. And we played like 14 encores. We did not want to leave. And when we finally left, somebody said, okay, now you can just stay in this country and play indefinitely. And I never forgot that, because it was true. What I was told was that y'all don't buy hype, but you get hype. You're connected to like Western, the pop star machine. So you're aware of it, but you don't buy it. You want to see if somebody can actually bring it, if people can actually play, and you're not going to fall for the fashion crap. And I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it. And I love you for it. So I'm going to keep coming back. And if you don't kick me out, I'll just stay.
I am sure no one would complain if you were just performing here indefinitely. I suppose I should ask as well. I don't suppose you remember what that movie was.
They just kept talking about St. John the Baptist's eyes. And I'll ask my bass player, Bernie.
Now I'm just fascinated as to what it could have been.
I'll send it to you if I find it, and I'll get you some pretty, like, exquisite screenshots so you can understand the depths of our whacked outness at the time.
Please do. Now, I suppose in the interest of time, I should get into this final segment of the podcast. Now, the name of this podcast is Trusty Chords, and it's seeing me follow a very labored sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I have to edit this little part out. It sees me following a very labored sort of idea of using the 1, 3, and 5 structure of a standard chord. So I ask you about one artist that has been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can turn to. Now, these albums and songs don't need to be by your one artist. So it's very wordy, but I guess my first question for you, Kristin, is there one specific artist that comes to mind if I ask who was the most inspirational artist to you?
That's a tough one. I wasn't inspired. I heard music and copied it down, but having done so, I got tight with the local music critics because they were coming to our shows and they didn't know how to hang out with little girls. Like, we were really like 13, 14 years old. And so they said, well, do you babysit? Because if you come over and you're my babysitter, we can talk about music and I'll leave you stacks of records, and we would just, talk for hours. And so this one dude wrote for the Providence Journal. He would always say, like, put the kids to bed. I left you a stack of records in my office. And yeah, so he said the top one is a band called the Violent Femmes, and it's you. It's just the boy you. And so, I mean, I liked his kids, so I let them stay up and listen to records too. I put them to bed. I'm not a mean babysitter. And I put on the Violent Femmes' first record, and I was like, oh my God, this is my species. I didn't know. I thought I was an alien here. But Gordon was, he was the boy me, and we played together a lot. And we were even physically alike, like small, kind of cherubic, angry on the inside, nice on the outside. We really are the same species. But I think it was probably Blister in the Sun that I heard first and thought, oh man. But he makes it sound better than I did, I think. The alien nature. I actually sounded like an alien.
I still remember the first time I heard Violent Femmes, and I just remember thinking, there is nothing else like this out there. I mean, I think I would have heard Blister in the Sun when I was quite, young, but just hearing it and just thinking, like, why is this on, the radio? Like, you're looking at what the songs are about. You're hearing how you're hearing how Gordon is singing it as well. It's just like, this is not like anything else that's out there. And I can understand why you feel it's so alienistic. Plus, the rest of that album is just, it's phenomenal, truly.
It really is, and it is an anomaly when it comes to the recording industry, which I like. I like anomalies. It wasn't, their fame wasn't bought. Almost all fame is bought. It's not like the public votes for famous people. They're just promoted, and the public is aware of them and not aware of anything else. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. But the Femmes, they're definitely promoted. They're on Slash, but they're like, it took them longer to have a gold record than like any other band ever. They broke some record for it taking longer. But all that means is that the record was passed around. And in fact, I just played with them not that long ago. My youngest son, Bodie, was a Violent Femmes fan of all things. And he and Gordon bonded. He's like, I got a roadie for that show, Mom. And they were like the same size. It was so nice to play with them again because we hadn't seen each other since we were teenagers.
Wow, it's amazing. Now, my next question for you here is, what are three albums that have been very impactful to you over the years? This could obviously be albums you're just throwing on, or something that was integral to your music evolution. And of course, it doesn't have to be the Violent Femmes self-titled, but I wouldn't blame you for that top of the list.
Yeah, that record made me feel like I had a friend because that critic was right. Gordon was the boy in me, and I was maybe more overwrought and tangled and complex, and he was more fun. But that's what boys are like. But the Meat Puppets Up on the Sun was the next record that I didn't think, yeah, this is me. I thought this is magic. And it carried me through recording our first record because it was so brave, so unselfconscious, I want to say. They were playing clean guitars, which was, they weren't strutting around. And it was inventive. It was, I was so bizarrely inventive and not proud of that it's not something I really admired. But in their case, it was just so sweet. So they were so unto themselves, and they were doing this thing where they could harmonize together, but out of tune with the guitars.
Yes.
Which was so fascinating and such a cool otherworldly effect. I did see them on that tour, and they didn't do that. They were singing in tune. I was so disappointed.
Yeah, I'm just sort of actually in my mind. I'm going through like the opening track, Up on the Sun, and I'm just sort of thinking, like, I mean, it's such a fascinating song right from the start. But yeah, now that you're sort of pointing out the sort of the harmonizing and not sort of in tune and everything, it's all sort of like making a little bit more sense in my mind.
Yeah, it's astonishing. And they have had some moments after that, just like the Femmes had Never Tell, but neither band ever accomplished anything like that again, which they're open about, and they feel lucky to have been there for a moment. But this is what I mean. Like when you're in your real life, there are inspired moments all over the place. For luminaries don't glow. Your moments do. Go with them. Which is why, fame is obviously played out already. And it's helping to hand people selfie culture and say, oh, this is how the sausage is made. Now you are an ad and a product. Go. And so they see, oh, God, it's all bullshit. But I think those two moments are truly exceptional, even given like that first record cliche. Musically, they changed a lot in my head. I don't know if they changed a lot in my sound, but it really helped me to be honest about my own sonic vocabulary, that they were brave enough to do the same with theirs.
And I suppose I should ask, were there any other albums that were specifically impactful for you over the years, or was it just or those are the ones that come to mind specifically?
The band X was really big for me. Like Wild Gift, I suppose, was that was really impactful. And I just love Exene. We've toured with them. 50 Foot Wave played with X a lot. And John Doe and I tour together all the time. But Exene is she's a magic person. She's a true poet, a real artist. And, I hate to say it, but she's female. And I really needed that. Someone who wasn't making those stupid faces. You're allowed the two faces, the fashion face and the fuck me face, and she wouldn't do that. She was a human. and I needed that.
And it's also very clear that the Slash Records label is one that's very impactful for you as well. Got the likes of
Yeah, I
Fans
know.
X and everything. Yeah.
If only we had ended up on Slash instead of Fire.
No, there's still time, I'm sure. Not quite. So, and I guess lastly, I would love to know, five songs that you could always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement. I'd love to know your five trusty songs.
I think Vic Chestnut's Myrtle.
Mm.
Um, I used to make him play it. We used to sit on stage together and play, and just trade songs back and forth. And we would request, we wouldn't take requests from the audience, but we'd take requests from each other.
Mm.
And he knew it was always going to be Myrtle for me. It's just the my favorite thing that Vic did was become like an 80-year-old and then an 8-year-old and then jump back to 80 and then 8. And not everybody gets as many songs as Vic did. And still, I think 10% of his songs were my heart. And I used to tell him, it's just like, yeah, just get rid of the others. You're the king when it comes to 80 to 8. Just keep doing that. And he would just flip me off, but he would play Myrtle. So I turn to it even now, because it reminds me of songs that breathe. And I suppose Pink Moon, right? How could you not?
Of course.
It's just wide awake and sounds like it's falling asleep. And then maybe Elliott Smith's um, Alameda.
Mm. Very nice choice.
And I would say Tendon Levy's Tendril, which is he's a musician that he was here in New Orleans for a while. Sad story. His life was really hard. He was one of those pain carriers, and he and my son Wyatt got very close. Wyatt's another pain carrier. But yeah, you can find his story, but his song Tendril is just so beautiful. The fact that we're losing so many strong soldiers in what is still an attention economy is so very heartbreaking to me, because we're in this interim solution of attention economy, which is just an explosion of noise, and we lose the real music and all that noise, and we lose the real songwriters, and he's one of those, as was Yanlu. Do you know Yanlu?
I don't believe I do. No.
There's another pain carrier boy. His song, I Know What It's Like. So I keep turning to these people who hurt, because one of them, I just seem made of pain. And I'm told that people who bring pain to my shows leave without it.
Mm.
But I also know that I'm sort of drawn to pain. I don't mean to be, but I end up in these places where everything falls apart. Like the most recent, the LA fires, but stuff like that, like burning buildings and shootings and car accidents, and the homeless like sort of gather around me. I was just in a drugstore here in New Orleans, and a woman started telling me, she was an employee still holding her pricing gun, told me that her daughter was murdered, and told me the whole story. And we hugged, and she said, I don't know why I said that. And I said, I have to tell you, people say that all the time to me. So I don't know. There's something about um, catching pain that seems to I'm not going to say we transmute it, but it transmutes itself and becomes this music that helps carry the pain away from the people, I want to say. And that's what I think that's why I felt alienated, and why my son has now lost two best friends by their own hand who were both songwriters. And that the pain carrying thing, we have not given it safety. Instead, we have elaborately rewarded vanity in this industry. And if we're going to remain human, we need to stop doing that in our own lives.
Truly. Wow. No, that is a really wonderful way to look at it. But I can also definitely say, your music has definitely been a source of comfort for me over the years. So it has been it has
Oh,
been a true
thank
pleasure to have a
you.
chat to you today, Kristin. I hugely appreciate your time.
Oh, that's a huge honor. I'm glad you do what you do, because, God, you straddle two very different worlds, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so very much. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast. Is how I should end this podcast.
It was nice talking to you, Tyler. What a treat.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, there's no obligation, but I'm forever grateful if you do. As always, I'm also over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. And I've also got a blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's TYLERJENKE/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. You know by now what you can find on this site, but you can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform, where you can throw me a few dollars to help keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. Lastly, I need to thank Kristin Hersh for spending time with me this week for the podcast, and I also need to thank Joe from Joe Corbett Publicity for helping organise this chat as well. On the topic of appreciation, I also appreciate you, dear listener, for always dealing with the little chirping birds that I have outside my window when I'm trying to record this each and every week. You can probably hear them as we speak, so I also need to say, thanks birds, you really help make this podcast a little extra special. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.